Hello, this is Todd with the Psychic Zone. I know it's been a while since my last podcast, but there were some things that I wanted to share today. And a lot of people ask about psychic readings and how I go about that. And I will get into a little bit of that. And then I also get questions from clients and some of my followers on Facebook. And I thought I'd talk about some of those too. Anyway, I wish you well during this holiday season. We just had Thanksgiving, and now Christmas is upon us. It's been quite a year. I just made a lot of changes on my website, and I think they're good changes. I've kind of toned things down a bit this year and kind of scaled back some of the readings that I've offered, but I'm trying to simplify things. Unfortunately, my prices went up slightly, not a lot, but what hasn't gone up? I mean, the economy is really not in a good place right now, and people ask me all the time about the economy, and I think it's not going to improve too much till about 3 or 4 years from now. So 2028, 2029, I think we'll see some improvements in the economy, but not yet. That goes for a lot of stuff. We some things with housing are just overinflated still. I think that'll stay. As far as investments, I think metals are actually a good investment. I think gold, silver, those are good investments. But I would be careful the next few years with the economy. And anyway, that is a question by a few of my followers because they were asking about economic times and when it's supposed to improve. I had somebody asked me the other day, will there ever be a cure for cancer? Now, I've talked about this a little bit, and it's a very complex topic, although, I mean, cancer has been around for centuries, okay? Hundreds, possibly thousands of years. But it wasn't until we did experimenting out in the Pacific and out in the deserts of this country with atomic weapons and atomic bombs, I think it really escalated things with cancer. That's my personal opinion. I think partly the atmosphere, partly the chemicalization of our foods and our crops, okay? And then we are also in the hub of the wheel right now, which means that the world is spinning faster and faster. So it's a multi-layered issue. As far as a cure for it, I do see a treatment for it in the future that will really be beneficial. Are we doing anything right now? I think there's a lot of promise in the stem cell type research, and I think that's where the future of it will go. We all have the potential in our bodies to grow cancer. Okay. The conventional methods, and this is my opinion, are rather barbaric. And I don't think that we're going to be using these methods in the future. I think they kill the immune system, and I also think that it just goes against uh, the healing process and stuff like that. I think that I see cells and I see cell research and how to kind of refabricate the body and the immune system. And I think that will be the future of cures. So I think there is a lot of research in this, but as far as where we are technology wise right now, we're just at a fraction of what we should be. Okay. I would say between 1 and 10, 10 being the cure of all diseases, we're probably at about a 3 or 4 at the most. So it's a lot better than years ago, but also we have more complex diseases and more complex cancers than we once had. I think that lifestyle is very important. I also think our attitude about it is very important because I have seen people use alternative methods to heal themselves um, with 100% remission. And then you say to yourself, is it really those alternative methods, or was it also their attitude? Because if your attitude is down, so will your immune system, your body. So I really think a lot has to do with your attitude. And that goes for everything. Other topics people have been asking me about. A lot of people want to know about readings and also their own psychic abilities. And I heard somebody the other day mention on a podcast how dark, psychics and their abilities are. And I don't really know where that comes from. Yes, there are other so-called psychics who really dive into the dark practices. I'm not one of those. Most psychics I know and mediums don't either. There's some very good mediums and there's some very good psychics out there. And then there's also some really bad ones. Okay. There's a lot that prey on people that have curses. Give me $1,000 and I'll remove this curse from you. And I think one thing, and I've spoken to other mediums and other psychics recently who share the same opinion about our society. Our society is really challenged right now. Really challenged. Some of the readings that I've been doing for clients, they're pretty alarming. And I'm talking about people who've just gone crazy. There's probably a half dozen of my clients going through divorce right now with partners that just suddenly just lost it. So there's a lot of that going around, and if you're a medium and you also know that that's a big disruption to connection with spirits and connections to the other side, so I feel really bad for psychics and mediums right now. We're in a very challenging world, and people are very challenging, and we cannot see things clearly under those circumstances. I often watch older movies. That means movies from the 70s and earlier. And if you look at people back then, people look very different. They're everything from their eyes to their whole aura to their complexion. They were just very different people back then. And there was a solidness. And people generally looked more solid. And as a psychic, you do read somebody's aura and energy. And that kind of leads me to another question, too, that one of my followers had. They said, what's it like for you out in public and when you go to the store or you go to a mall? And that's a good question. I mean, do I read people? I can. And it really depends on the place. And this goes along with giving readings to the public. Is everybody going to be in tune with me? Are they going to be open to me? No, not always. But if I go, let's say, into a store, and let's say there's like 10 people around me. Now, depending on the place, I would say most likely, if it's, let's say, some of the local convenience stores, there's going to be 1 or 2 people that I think would be open to a reading out of 10. There's going to be 3 or 4 that are all over the place emotionally, and they're probably going to be more difficult to read. And there's probably going to be 1 or 2 out of the crowd that are quite shady, who I probably wouldn't want to read for. I have gotten feelings from people that I've been around that this person is not right. And they could be dangerous. I don't feel that all the time, but I have, and I've felt a little more lately about that. Danger in what way? Oh, I think that there's, physical harm that they would cause in somebody else. I think there's a cause of theft from those people. And I've read a lot of this lately. But like I said, it depends what place I'm in and where I go. And no, I don't usually, read people when I'm out. But I have said, people who recognize me and ask me questions, I have said things to them. But for all psychics and mediums right now, the 10 in the store, the numbers are thinning out with people who are actually open to this kind of knowledge, to this kind of work. So we're not becoming a more open society. I think chemically, people are different too. I just turned 60 this year. It's been a tough year. I can tell you, it's been tough. 60 is just, to all the 70-year-olds out there, they're like, oh, you're a baby. Well, 60's, it's a harsh reality. And, I'm grateful that I've gotten this far. But you also have, sort of a different attitude on life. And when I read people nowadays who are in the 60 plus age range, I mean, they don't even recognize this society anymore. It's really so complicated. Um, the other day, I actually went for my annual doctor's test and blood tests and all that. And it's weird how sometimes I'll go into a doctor's office or a dentist's office and they ask me, what kind of medications are you on? I'm like, none. And they look at me kind of funny, like, wait, hold on, you're 60, you're not on any kind of medication? I'm like, no. I said I had high cholesterol last year, but I actually burned it down many, many points below just through exercise, diet, that kind of thing. So I'm not on a medication. They're kind of like, whoa. That's one thing that's a concern for me is all the different medications out there. And sometimes when I'm doing a reading, somebody's got a health issue, I will kind of reevaluate what if, where the problem is coming from. Is it a result of medicines? Oftentimes it is. And I've had some clients go back to their doctors and try something different or eliminate something with good results, But we've become the standard of this culture with medicines is very concerning to me. I think it affects people psychologically. I don't think all medications for the mind are good. I've also talked to a lot of clients with anxiety problems, and I've sort of helped them through that. The one thing that we need to do is change more, and always have change. It's a very harsh reality being mortal, being human. And I think 60 has awakened me to that fact of, so we're on this road and, it's going to end. It's like, what the hell? Hold on, I'm having fun here. Why does it have to end? It is a really hard reality to kind of face, is mortality. I think the secret for coping with it is to make your life as interesting as possible, to always change, to always challenge your mind, to see another side of existence that we don't see. I've watched so many shows about so-called, they will challenge psychics and, how psychics work. And I've seen shows on, like documentaries on near-death experiences and how people have had these experiences and it changed their life and their thinking and everything they know about life. Those are very interesting, but scientists just don't have, they really can't look past the scientific thinking and realize that there's more than our brain. you know. I don't think psychic abilities come through the type of thinking that you do or the way you think. I it's something that we once had a long time ago that we still have, although some people are blocked and don't have it. Some people are able to have visions through dreams, some have premonitions, some have just overall feelings. Psychosis sometimes can be related to seeing things, being out of our body. But there's, psychic abilities, I don't believe, are a brain thing. Okay? In fact, some people who have had near-death experiences with something associated with the brain have come out with more clarity, more vision. So their experience activates them. Okay? It's just, there's more to this reality than scientists know. And, I see it everywhere. We look at medical knowledge, and then scientists just look at it just one way, okay? But there's always other alternatives. There's always other ways to look at it. When I see, science programs about whether it be ancient Egypt or it might be old cultures, that kind of thing, I look at the science as like there's a few puzzle pieces in the middle that they put together, but the whole board, the whole puzzle board is empty. There might be a couple of little fragments on the corners, puzzle pieces they put together. But, and then there's a lot of speculation. But there's so much they don't understand about our history and where we've come from. And I equate our mortality and our bodies and what our purpose here is not just from a scientific perspective. There are a lot of great things that I think this ability has made me realize. I know I complain about it. The work is hard, takes a lot out of me. But there's a lot of benefits if you can tune into psychic abilities. One is to look at things from a different perspective. That's the life that you're in. If you look at it as okay, this is the only chance I got. I'm 89 years old and almost gone. That's it. That's all. No. I deal with clients who, even children, who have a lot of issues because of the past life or something that happened in their past life before they were born. I just know this isn't the end chapter. Yes, our body gets old, it rots, we get diseases, and we're gone, but that's not the whole thing. Our consciousness regains consciousness after death. A lot of mediums, including myself, we do see what happens at death. We do. The problem is we don't always have all the answers, and we don't get the complete picture of what it's really like. Because we're focusing on our client, we're focusing on the energy at hand, we're focusing on a certain spirit or person, but we don't always have time, and we're not always shown what it's really like in death. I don't think it's much different than being alive. I think that even our experiences go with us. People who have had near-death experiences, and I've talked to quite a few of them, have a much different view about what we need to do in this life than most people do. Of course, we have to make money. That's one issue we have in this life, okay? Or the circumstances, whether you're looking after a family. So we have those responsibilities. But I think if a lot of people had a glimpse of what it's like after life, they may change what they're really striving for, you know? It's not exactly the attitude that, oh, I'm just going to forget all responsibilities, so I'm going to this wonderful place. No. This life is an opportunity. It is, you know, with all the negativity, there's just so many incredible experiences you can have in this life. Things to do. But a lot of people that I talk to have been really dulled down. They don't see it. They don't give a crap about it. They don't care about positive experiences. You know, they want a partner. They want, you know, that's another thing that's one client asked me about, you know, what about partnerships? Ooh, it's tough. It's really tough. I mean, I know a lot of people that have just shut down completely. You know, be inspired by something in your life, and you'll find somebody who wants to be around you because you're inspired. Okay? That's very important. Also, you know, a lot of people just will not change enough to make certain parts of their life happen. Socially, romantically, you know. It's actually not a bad time for people to find partnerships right now, because a lot of people have died. There's a lot of pretty young widows out there, male and female, because of what transpired in 2020. So there is a lot of opportunity out there right now for people to find partners. And when I do a reading, is I'll kind of evaluate whether I'm looking at somebody who needs to change their location, or they need to change their job, or they need to get basically just get into something that's not what they're usually into. You know, if you're a single person out there and you want a partner, and let's say you're inspired by historical things, well, then you need to join a historical group or society or something and be with them, because most likely you're going to find somebody who appreciates it like you do, and that's a good partnership. But the biggest mistake that I see happening a lot is there's a checklist. And this is male or female. They have to be this height. They need to be around this age. They cannot have, smoking habit, or they can't, vote Republican, or they can't do this. They've got a more don'ts than what they want most of the time. You'll never find anybody that way. And it's just, partnerships come from inspiration, not by negativity and what you're avoiding. And but our society has really, really changed that way. It has really changed that way. And I don't know what the answer is. I think that people need activities outside of their home and outside of their phones and their computers. The internet is very dangerous, okay? So there's a lot of people with problems on the internet. And I've heard those stories too. I've had clients that were taken for thousands and thousands, I won't even tell you how much, thousands of dollars by scams on the internet related to dating. And these are smart people. These are, people who work some prestigious jobs, and people are very cunning out there and have taken advantage. And oh my God, some of these stories are incredible. Incredible. But let's talk about, as far as psychic work itself, it's besides the environment and things that you can do, and I know there's some people on here who are already psychics, and they might even be psychic investigators. And I think one thing is to focus on what you specialize on or specialize in. You might be a nurse, but do you specialize in something? Is there something that you really lean to? I mean, you may just really like working with children. You might be, really into working with skin, dermatology, okay? So in the psychic world, I think it's important to know what you specialize in first and stick with it. Not just a broad spectrum, I'll do a reading for you and that's it. So I think to be successful at something, you do need to focus in on what your specialty is. When I first started, well, no, I won't say that. When it took a long time before I made profession out of this. And I knew at that point that I had abilities. I was probably in my late 30s to early 40s. And so I spoke to a couple of psychics, a couple of people that I trusted. Very notable people, very good psychics, much older than me at this point. But, we were talking about it, and I finally said, I'm thinking about making this more of a profession now. And I didn't want to step on anybody's feet. I didn't want to be like, well, I'm going to take all your business away. No. So I was asked, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I think I'm going to focus on animals, actually. And I remember him saying, well, that's good. I said, I've helped people find a lot of missing pets locally. I've helped them with readings for their pets. And I want to do things that really provide proof to this profession. I want to actually do something. I don't just want to tell people something and it may or may not happen. I want to do something. So that was my focus. Also investigations, because I solved several investigations back in my old state of Massachusetts, and I found a couple deceased missing people. I also helped find a man that was missing. He was injured, but he was okay afterwards. And I found that person in another state. So I had some behind my belt, but I actually wanted to really provide proof to people that this is real. We can do something with it, And at the same time, I was doing other readings for people. So always, I think details and coming up with some kind of results were really my focus early on in psychic work. And you might be a medium, you might be a really good medium, but focus on what it is that you want to specialize in. There's some mediums that just go to homes. They go to homes to communicate with spirits, and then there's some who have other specialties. So that's a very important thing. The investigations came very naturally to me. I had kind of a good rapport with the law enforcement because they saw me as just kind of this average looking guy or very straightforward guy. I think they expected to see somebody who was a lot more outlandish and different and, but, so I knew that was something that I would do later on, despite some actually some psychics told me, no, you can't just specialize in that kind of stuff. But I just for years just said, no, I this is what I want to do. Because I already knew about some of the negativity out there with psychics. The whole Hollywood persona, and then the different fakes that are out there who have done some bad things to people. I've heard all these stories, but I was really skeptical to make this a career. And, I don't think a day goes by where I'm not kind of blown away by something that occurred in a reading or something that I saw. I don't get all giddy about it, but I'm like, whoa, you know, um, how could I know this stuff? But to me, it's comes to me like I'm making toast in a toaster or something. Just put it in, it comes out, Don't really think about it. Once you do have confidence as you go on, it does make things easier. That's with everything, even sports, you know. And I evaluate psychic abilities kind of like art, like drawing. You put a dozen people into a classroom for the first time, and they've had no prior art history or anything. You're going to find maybe two or three out of them have completely natural ability. I mean, what comes out of their pencils and their drawing is without any kind of prior lessons is natural. It just comes natural to them. Then there's another half of the class that through lessons, they do become better. But it takes a lot longer for them to become better. And then there's a few left over who just forget it. I'm not going to draw anymore. I'm not going to do art. I find this happens with psychic abilities and with psychics. But like I said, really, so if you are an established psychic, you really focus on what your specialty is, and that can help a lot. It helps with your motivation. It helps with the clientele that you'll attract to your work. I was actually just doing a reading today. I was trying to find a missing dog for some clients, and dog's been missing almost a month, and it's kind of I'll go through the kind of standard things of asking some questions because I'm trying to confirm what I'm seeing, and I felt that the dog was stolen, except I also felt some significant locations, that I talked about in the map. But I also wait till there's proof. So I don't say, oh, I'm very sorry, your dog is deceased, and, or, your dog's living in New Mexico or somewhere, and he's on the couch in somebody's living room. No, you got to be... In detective work, you have to go by facts. You have to first give some clues. If any hits come upon the clues, like, oh, hold on, that dog was seen there, that's a positive. It means that you're probably on the right track, and you go from there. But you never jump ahead and tell people things that may or may not be true, especially life or death. I found deceased dogs, but we're still looking for them. We're still trying to find them, and I have found them. But so if you want to do this publicly, you do have to be very careful with people. How would you feel if your dog was missing? You'd probably be a mess. I know I would be. I don't want, to call somebody and say, oh, well, your dog has passed. If a lot of times I'll tell them I don't feel movement, And that can also mean, and I'll tell them, it can mean that the dog has stopped. It's kind of rested in an area. Or it might be at a home. Okay. Could have also been picked up from that location by a vehicle, like, the trail stops here. I think a vehicle came in and took this dog away. So a lot of times, especially with a pet that's been missing for a while, I will give some options. I will not go by one thing. If something else comes to me, if it's the make of a vehicle or the description of a house, or if it's a road, I'll give that. But I usually am trying to find evidence. But a lot of times with missing pets, unfortunately, people do not know how to pick up their phones. So if you have a missing pet, you need to talk to people in the street. I have seen this so many times. I have seen it so many times. There's an area, I remember a neighborhood, the whole place had flyers of this missing cat, okay? Whole neighborhood. I mean, these people put out a huge effort. No calls. Nobody. I said, you got to ask people. They're like, why? We have the flyers up. I said, they're not going to call. So they go in the neighborhood. They go to a street that I told them. They saw a guy out in his yard. They asked the guy. The guy said, oh, yeah, I saw this cat yesterday. They're like, why didn't you call? People are like that today. All right, communication skills are at an all-time low. And, this phone society is really a problem too. It doesn't make people more intellectual, doesn't make them more outward, doesn't make them more social. I mean, you can do text, you can do message, you can do a video call. You'd think it'd make people more social. It doesn't. They have become more selfish, and they become, less outward in the world. I think back years ago, I mean, before cell phones, and I used to drive an off-road vehicle, a Jeep. And it often, I mean, the engine just sucked in the thing. It would often break down. And you get stuck somewhere, you're either hitching a ride with somebody, or you're walking to somebody's house. Can I use your phone? I don't think people could do that today. I really don't. And drive a stick shift car too. Well, anyway. But yeah, I think the phone culture is look, if you're psychic and you have abilities, I would urge you to spend less time on the computer and phones. You need a blank mind to do this work. You also need less stuff in your mind overall. And I've talked to a lot of clients with anxiety problems, and the phones just make it worse. I'm like, get off the phone. Especially relationships. Do not have a relationship with a partner by text. Never. That's a no-no. Okay? Meet that person in person. If they live far away, then call them. But don't have a texting relationship. it will make things bad. Yes, if you text with your husband or your wife and, do we need lettuce from the market? Sure, go ahead and text them. Or I'm running late, I will be home at this time, then text them. But I mean, anything of emotions, that kind of thing, don't text anybody. As far as some of the other questions I've had from clients, a lot of people seem very interested in past lives. And, I have talked to clients. I think there was a client last week that I was talking to, and I believe I was talking about her son and some of the issues he was having. And, I was relating some of his issues to the life that he had previously and some unfinished business that happened. I also believe I did one reading where a male wanted to become a female, and without being biased, it was interesting. I felt that man was actually a woman in his past life. I very clearly saw it. It's very, very interesting. And so a lot comes from our past lives, and evaluating them can actually help people a lot of times. A lot of mediums do that. It's all about opening up perspective for people. Anyway, also, I appreciate all of the positive feedback I've had from people recently and in the past, but especially recently. There's some people who have suffered bad health. We're going through a lot of issues right now. I try to help people to come to a middle ground so their life is not plagued by that. I think opening ourselves, and I hate to say the word spiritual, but in more of a spiritual way, I think can help. Why do I hate to say spiritual? Because I think it's like you have to become something or part of a religion or part of an organization. You really don't. It's really just changing your thinking, the way you understand things. And this life is really an opportunity to understand things. And that's the positive note I will leave you with, is if you're going through something really hard right now, what are the positives you're learning from this? If there aren't any, then create some. We it's like the art class thing that I was talking about. You go into this room, this art room, you've got clay, you've got paint, you got wood, you got any kind of materials, and you find something that really, really inspires you. That's kind of like life. You have to create inspiration, okay? And if you're working every day, you have to actually, you have to be more vigilant about that. You have to take time out for yourself. Anyway, it was nice talking here. And if you have questions or if you have a topic you'd like to hear about, why don't you write it below? I think that this podcast goes on YouTube. It does come to my website. It also, I post on my Facebook page, but I think on YouTube, you can comment below that. I had people sending some letters to the show itself. They were pretty risky materials, so I didn't want to post them, and I eliminated the writing to the show part. So we'll keep it on social media for now. Anyway, I wish you a very good holiday season if I don't talk to you, but I'll try to drop in soon. Take care.